The Hunted. While vetting a planet applying for membership in the Federation, the Enterprise discovers dark secrets hidden in its past. You know, we haven't mentioned the different intro for Season 3, including that weird star thing that happens right before the ship appears.
I noticed it. I feel like it was a clever way to transition between the two shots.
Yeah.
The planet Agnosia 3 wants entrance into the Federation, so Prime Minister Narok is giving Riker and Picard a tour.
He's played by James Cromwell.
Who is, of course, best known for Spider-Man 3.
What? He's known for Babe. He's in tons of stuff. During this, a prisoner escapes from a penal colony, but the Prime Minister seems pretty relaxed about the whole thing, even when he's talking about how dangerous it is.
His criminal record is too long to go into, but I must caution you that he is given to bouts of uncontrollable violence.
The prisoner is identified as Roga Danar, and he does a pretty good job of eluding the Enterprise for a surprisingly long period of time.
Because Picard and Riker are down on the planet, Data's sitting in the captain's chair, which I don't think we've seen before. And Riker eventually figures out how Danar is eluding the Enterprise.
If he's hanging over the planet's pole, the magnetic field would confuse our sensors.
I like how the Prime Minister points out how dangerous Danar is, but the crew is just really impressed by how he keeps outwitting them.
This guy knows all the tricks, doesn't he?
This guy's incredible.
After Danar makes it appear that he dies when his ship explodes, they find out he escaped in an escape pod, and they beam him onto the Enterprise. He immediately starts fighting everybody in the transporter room, and O'Brien does a much better job than their traditionally inept security guards.
I thought all the fights in this episode were so choreographed. They looked so fake.
It's cool that they tried to do action, but it definitely feels kind of stiff and weird. And he finally manages to get taken down by Riker and Worf's stunt doubles.
Danar is played by Jett McCarthy. He is also in RoboCop 2, so that's 3 actors so far. I don't know what's going on, but something's going on.
If it's related to RoboCop 2, I'm okay with it.
He was also the voice of Michigan J. Frog in the 90s.
Hello, my baby, hello, my honey, hello, my ragtime gal.
They put him in the brig, and it's revealed that he exhibits no life signs.
Which never really gets explained.
They try and use it as an excuse later to say why they can't track him, but, I mean, they're so dumb anyway.
Troy detects pain and fear from Danar and goes to his cell to talk to him, and he tells her that he was well cared for on the prison planet.
I'm going to point out, I'm a huge fan of their inverse drawers. It was so cool.
So practical.
Hey, where should I keep this water? How about this box?
Troy tells Picard that Danar has a non-violent personality and seems to regret his crimes. And this was the point where this episode started reminding me of the original series episode Dagger of the Mind, where a dangerous patient escapes onto the Enterprise, and the doctor in charge of the facility turns out to not be completely forthcoming about everything that's really going on.
Then there's this huge scene where pretty much all the main characters are in one room vomiting out the entire plot in one big chunk. Could they just not figure out a way to work that in organically?
Well, that's what happens when you devote half the episode to action scenes. Data and Troy look at Angosian records and determine that he was a soldier, but they can't identify his crime, and they determine that he was artificially enhanced by the Angosian government and programmed to be the perfect soldier and become violent when necessary. And when they were no longer needed, they were sent to the prison instead of being allowed to reintegrate into society.
So Data goes to talk to Danar in his cell for a while, and then Picard goes to talk to Danar in his cell for a while, and then Troy goes to talk to Danar in his cell for a while.
When they try to transport Danar back to the Angosians, he somehow disrupts the transporter beam and gets loose, which never really gets explained.
Yeah, he just forces his way out somehow. But where does he go? He's suddenly just not there.
How does he determine that he's not going to disperse his molecules or get beamed out into space somewhere?
And since he doesn't exhibit life signs, they can't just beam him again. But he still has mass. He still takes up space. They can't detect a mass moving through the ship that doesn't match what's supposed to be there. They don't have motion sensors in the future.
Him not having life signs was a really lazy way to have him be able to stand up to the crew of the Enterprise, but realistically, they should have been able to catch him pretty easily, I would think.
And then at one point, he just steals the guy's walkie-talkie to get the force field turned off.
Drop force field on deck 36.
He leads Worf and Data on a wild goose chase through the ship, making them think he's doing one thing and then going off and doing something else.
At one point, he puts a phaser set to explode inside of a panel, and I thought it was interesting that the crew can detect minute things, even like the panel itself being open, but they couldn't detect that he pretty much put a bomb inside of it.
The idea of phasers being manually set to overload is something that I already had a problem with in the original series. Why would that be something that you could manually set them to do? I suppose if you're in a really dangerous situation, I'm already contradicting myself, you could set it to do that and then throw it at the enemies or something, but it just seems kind of unsafe.
The crew's next fail is trapping him in a cargo bay, saying, let's flood it with gas to sedate him, which is smart, but then assuming it worked without really checking anything.
That should put our boy to sleep.
Return environmental conditions to normal, Mr. Data.
After he's already proven super resourceful and has outwitted them so many times already.
These are characters that do not learn from previous experiences.
Including ones that happened 10 seconds ago.
I thought it was funny the way he uses a phaser to power up the transporter. It's like in the future every piece of technology is interchangeable and they could just get anything to work with anything else.
That made me think of the episode The Enemy, when the Romulan was telling Geordi to link his stuff together, and Geordi was like, that's stupid, how would that even work?
And after 45 minutes, he finally manages to escape.
The crew confronts the Prime Minister about all the experiments they did on the soldiers, and they ask him why he can't just reverse it. And I thought his explanation was lazy and stupid.
The chemicals can be removed from their systems, but we're not convinced that the psychological conditioning can ever be entirely reversed.
Have you tried, sir?
We studied it thoroughly.
Then all the prisoners bust in, including the guy that slides down that rope, which would have had to have been there before, so someone would have noticed a rope falling down, but nobody says anything. So, okay.
Since the soldiers will only become violent if attacked, Picard urges everyone not to fight back.
Then he throws out some Prime Directive bullshit.
We cannot interfere in the natural course of your society's development.
And they don't even hang around to see what happens, but just cut out entirely.
That's all I have. Can we finish this one?
Yeah.
The Hunted. Overall?
The plot of this episode was very drawn out, but I thought it wasn't in a boring way like usual, but instead was with action scenes, which is very unusual for this show. They were better executed than I would have expected given what's come before, but they were still kind of goofy, and I wish more time had been devoted to getting deeper into the actual conflict, instead of conversations being just for explaining things. This was a perfect opportunity for more philosophical discussion, and I was intrigued with where things were going with Data and Danar in particular, but it turned out to be nowhere. But I didn't think it was bad. I would give it a C+.
Ugh. Oh, God. Okay. I gave this one an F+.
Really?
Let me explain myself. It seems to start off as an episode to explore depth of character, but the scenes that are meant to explore Danar's depth aren't very deep. Those scenes hold way too long, and it quickly becomes repetitive filler. It almost felt like a play, but a bad play. He's one-dimensional, and the real conflict is on the Angosian government's experiments and subsequent discarding of that piece of their society. So I agree with you there. But there was this hardcore shifting of gears from character exploration to action, with the pivot point being this gigantic regurgitation of plot. And then, since they had totally shattered a coherent episode at that point with really no hope of salvage, they decided to shove in an ending using the cheap MacGuffin of the Prime Directive while madly hurtling the crew towards the next episode and away from this god-awful dumpster fire. I was also disappointed that James Cromwell's acting ability was totally wasted. He seemed bored the whole time, and I don't blame him. The whole show up, make things 1,000 times worse by sticking our fingers in every facet of your society, then leave you to clean up the mess we made in the name of improving your civilization under the guise of not interfering, is on full display here. They act so magnanimous about it, and they just keep jerking each other off all the way down to the very last line of dialogue. That's why I gave it that grade. So it seems we disagree on this one.
I thought the viewing enjoyment level made up for the episode's shortcomings. It's definitely not a great episode. It definitely could have used some depth, but I found it entertaining.
I know the background for this. They were aiming for a Vietnam vibe. about soldiers coming back from the war, but that message was kind of lost in this episode.
It felt like they had their ideas for what the themes of the episode were, but instead of exploring them, they just kind of told you what they were and then filled up the rest with action.
We'll just agree that I'm right.